We're very thrilled that you could all join us for today's very exciting program. The format for today's event will be an approximately 30 to 45 minutes of moderated Q&A with our guest speaker. You can drop your questions into the chat or into the Q&A at any point, and we will compile the questions for the director. Alternatively, since it's a small group of people, you can also use the raised hand function found at the bottom of your screen under reactions if you would like to be unmuted to ask your questions. We ask that all participants help us to create a safe virtual space for learning and exchange, and engage respectfully and professionally with the speaker and other participants in the chat. The Center for South Asia reserves the right to remove any disruptive participants from today's event. Today, we have the privilege and the honor to have with us Dr. Geetha J, the writer and director of Run Kalyani, which has been screened at over 15 film festivals since 2019 and has won numerous awards, including the Best Feature Film Award at the South Asian Film Festival in Montreal. Dr. Geetha J is a writer, director, and producer who started out as a print journalist, later moving into television. Upon acquiring her own video camera, she made her first film, Woman with a Video Camera, in 2005 from Kerala, which at the time had hardly any female filmmakers. Geetha then founded Akkampuram, an independent production company that has created a distinctive slate of experimental shorts and documentaries, both short and feature length. Run Kalyani is her debut feature fiction film. Geetha has collaborated with multi-award-winning documentary filmmaker Ian MacDonald on all of his works, most notably the internationally acclaimed Grierson-nominated feature documentary Algorithms from 2012 about young blind chess players from India. They are also known for their highly successful Freedom from 2017, a 4-screen film installation on the radical legacy of Martin Luther King. Geetha alternates between Trivandrum and Newcastle, where she lectures on film practice at Film at Culture Club. So please help me to virtually welcome our guest director and speaker, Dr. Geetha J. And before we dive into the Q&A, perhaps Dr. Geetha J can say a few words about her own trajectory as a filmmaker and the process of writing and directing Run Kalyani.
Thank you, Sarah, for that introduction, and thank you for inviting Run Kalyani and me for this session at Sasli. It's a pleasure. About my journey as a filmmaker, I am from Kerala in India, and we are quite well known for our progressive ideals, views, way of living, and so on. But when it comes to gender, when it comes to women, Kerala is probably as bad as any other part of the world. And there were not many women filmmakers in Kerala when I began filming. I started as a print journalist and I went into the electronic media, and there were hardly any women there as well, except as presenters. So when I began working on documentaries, I found the opportunities very, very low, and the possibilities were not very interesting either. So I left the electronic media and I began on my own journey of filmmaking. But this was possible only when I left Kerala. I was in Kerala all my life, and then I left Kerala at some point. I went to UK, and that distance helped me clear my thoughts and gave me the confidence, because I saw lots of other women making films, making work of art, and so on. So it gave me the confidence to go back to my place, my land, as it were, with a camera and make my first film, Woman with a Video Camera. And this point was also because of the democratization of the whole filmmaking process, with the arrival of video cameras, with the high quality video cameras, which women were able to take, which people from marginalized sectors were able to access. And you could ignore the hierarchical film industry setup, and you could just go out on your own and do things. So my training as a journalist and my experience in the electronic media, of course, was what helped me take up this camera and go and make my first film, Woman with a Video Camera. Now, it's extremely difficult to make a film for a woman, I think anywhere in the world, even today. But definitely it was when I made it in 2005 in Kerala. But more difficult than making a film is distributing that film. There is absolutely no way in which you can get your film across to an audience that would appreciate it. And so I just made films. I made a few short films. I made some documentaries. And because of this, because a work of art is never complete till it actually reaches an audience. So I always felt it was incomplete, what I was doing. And at some point, I just stopped. I stopped and I started working with Ian on his documentaries and as a producer. And all the while, which was around nearly 10 years or so, I was writing scripts. But the idea of actually finding money to make a fiction film, a feature-length fiction film, seemed almost like it was never going to happen. And then 10 years later, I just made my first fiction film, which is Run Kalyani. And so you can see in that film my years of engagement with the idea of women, about art, about freedom, and so on. Yeah, I think that's okay as an introduction.
Certainly. And of course, all of the attendees, please feel free to drop your questions into the chat and into the Q&A. In either case, we will compile those. As people are formulating their questions, I'll kick us off perhaps with one. Because I believe there are some people in attendance who are Malayalam speakers, but most of us here are not. Could you talk about the way in which, as you were writing this script, how you used language specifically to construct the characters' speech and their dialects in a way that would differentiate them socially, either by caste, class, gender, and how that information is cued to your Malayalam-speaking audience?
I think one of the most striking thing for all of you as language experts and teachers and students would be that there's not much of a dialogue in my film. There isn't a lot of dialogue in the film. So it's primarily a visual medium, and cinema itself is a language. It's a kind of universal language. And when I say universal, it's not completely, because there are certain images that evoke certain feelings and memories on people who know those kind of things, and it means something. Which it's just like language. It's just like when I say a sentence, it may seem one thing when it's translated, but it may be another thing for a native speaker. So the same thing goes for film language. It's also. Having said that, the film also uses, because for me, film is a mixed art. It's a mixed art in the sense it brings in all kinds of art forms into it. It's got language, it's got poetry, and you'll see there's a lot of poetry in my film. It's got poetry, it's got music, it's influenced by painting, sculpture, all kinds of things, all different art forms crystallize into a film. In terms of language, if you look at the setting, the landscape of the film, it's Trivandrum, known as Thiruvananthapuram, which is the capital of Kerala. And it's a out and out Trivandrum film in that sense, completely shot in Trivandrum, except for the last shot, which is in the borders. When she runs. But apart from that, it's completely within the Trivandrum city. 3 locations: the house of Kalyani, the house of the 2 people that she goes to work in. These are the 3. Architecturally, they're very interesting because Kalyani is from a particular caste class, and the other 2 people are also from certain. One is from a high rise, and the other is from a joint family house. So you can see, in terms of language, I don't know how many of the are there any Tamil speaking students in your group?
There are certainly in our program. I don't know how many may be in attendance today, but we do have some.
Okay, so they may have noticed that the Malayalam that Kalyani speaks is tinged with Tamil. Because there are a lot. Tamil Nadu is neighboring state to Kerala. There's a huge Tamil population in Kerala and in Trivandrum, and so Kalyani comes from a Tamil-speaking Malayali family. So many of the present generation speak Malayalam, but their Malayalam is mixed, sprinkled a lot with Tamil. So you'll see that the Malayalam that she speaks within her family, within her aunt and the people who come to see her, there's a lot of Tamil in it. But the moment you go to the houses, the two houses, that is a typical, what you might say as a typical Malayalam of Trivandrum. Not the Trivandrum slang as it is infamously known, but proper Trivandrum Malayalam in those two houses. Now, because there is very little of dialogue in the film, you wouldn't necessarily pick up many other many other things from the language. But there is poetry, and the poetry is translated in a way it can be translated. It's a poetic Malayalam language. It does not really belong to any particular dialect or anything like that. And yeah, that's all I've got to say about the language.
Wonderful, thank you. We have a question from Nicole in attendance. This was just such a wonderful film, really loved it. Nicole asks, how did you decide on which angles to shoot and show for each day that went by in film? And Nicole, if you want to elaborate at all, please feel free to do so in the chat.
Do you want me to?
Sure, yeah. You could go ahead and answer, or we can, yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the 3 days and then the last day, which comes after a while, we had told all the actors, and especially Kalyani, who is a fantastic actor, Gargi Ananthan. I had told her that this is what happens to you on each day. And this is the kind of progression that happens. And you can see it in her very body language, the way it starts getting more tense as the days pass by. The same thing went for camera as well, because the cinematographer, Madhu Neelakandani, is an extremely well-known and experienced award-winning cinematographer. And we had long discussions about this, and he had a clear idea about how this, of course, I wanted a more, if I had the funds and had all the gizmos that go with, the track shots and this and that and crane shots and stuff like that, none of that was there. We didn't have any of those things. But we kind of created that with just the handheld and the Steadicam and all those kind of things. We created that from a very ordinary, normal day, which is the first day, to something getting more tense and more, complicated. So it's a kind of like when I told this to the old man in the film, the father of the house. He's a well-known actor in India. He's Madhu sir. He's a legendary actor. He's a superstar of the bygone era, and he's 80 plus. When I first went to him and asked him, will you kind of like grace our film with your presence? And he listened to the story, because he's very particular, and he listened to the story, and he told me it's beautiful because it is there is a repetition, but it is never repetitive. And I thought that kind of summed up what we did in our acting, what we did in our cinematography, and so on. There is a repetition, but it's not repetitive. So it kind of tries to capture the things that we all do as human beings every day, the same thing, on and on, you and me, all of us, on and on and on. We do it. And yet we have a feeling feeling that every new day is going to be something else, something different. It's not going to be. I mean, if you look at it, oh my God, all these days, 365 into how many ever years, I was doing the same thing again and again, getting up in the morning, doing something, going back to sleep. So it's this thing that we wanted to capture, how there is a kind of monotony and at the same time, the possibility of something else, something that makes it different, and something that in the end will break it, will break that circle. So that was the idea behind the performance, behind the music, which I hope somebody will pick up, and then the cinematography and everything. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. We have a number of questions stacking up in the chat. From Catherine, we have this is such a beautiful film, all the way from the lighting to the textiles, yet also deeply painful. How did you balance this beauty with the horror of some of the events? Catherine writes, I sense that the production of the art and beauty are a sort of escape until a larger escape can be risked.
Yeah, I think that is the, thank you, Catherine. I think that is the crux of the film, that there is sadness in the film, definitely. But there is a kind of strength as well. And for me, that is the kind of, that is women's lives. That is our life, that women lead lives which are both painful as well as beautiful. And I've seen this all my life in women's lives everywhere. There is something that is very sad, and because there are possibilities that never happen. And when you talk to women and you talk about their dreams, talk about their hopes and all, it's full of possibilities. And then you see their reality and it's kind of like really pulls them down. And then you see how they manage everything. And then you really end up admiring their strength and how they tackle things. So these two feelings, and this is not something that many writers or filmmakers bring together when they talk about women, especially in issue-based films, which I know are very, very important, but it's sometimes very clear, like you are a victim throughout, and in the end you come out and burst free and you become this great, somebody who solves all the problem. It's not like that. I mean, at least that's not what I wanted to show. I wanted to show the kind of women that I have met all my life, which are these kind of very ordinary women who contain within them both the grief and also the possibility of breaking free from that grief. And which is why I think what I wanted to do was bring in the issues that affect women and bring in the issues that we all talk about as big problems in women's lives, but not make an issue-based film. Mine is Run Kalyani, as you will know, is not really an issue-based film, but it is there as layers. There's a whole thing about domestic violence, and we all know. I mean, in Kerala, especially, I mean, all over India, all over the world, domestic violence is a really big problem. And with the pandemic, it has only increased, not decreased. The amount of domestic violence that's going on around the world has increased. And it does not happen just in poor families, or it does not happen just in uneducated families, or so on. And it takes years sometimes for a woman to get out of it. So it was that the repetitiveness of that abuse, and it's also mental abuse. It's not just physical abuse. So that, and how it's kind of almost normalized in many families. It's taken for granted that that's how it is. That's how men are. Actually, he's a nice guy, but he's like a little frustrated and he takes it out on his wife, kind of thing. I know many families who kind of normalize it because they don't know how to face it and how to accept that it's a problem and to do something about it. So these were the things that, and poverty and work, how you work. And amongst all this, even when we talk about food, I mean, food is both a monotonous job of having to cook every day. At the same time, there is something beautiful about food because you are actually, it's the most important thing. The woman is doing the most important job in the world by actually feeding people in her family, or if she's working somewhere else, feeding those people, whatever, dealing with food. Food is the basis of everything. So it's this food that the woman makes. This is the thing that women have been making for centuries and centuries and centuries. And the most important activity, not war, not this, not that, but food. And that is the most important thing. And that has not been given the value and recognition that it has to be given. Of course, on the one hand, I recognize the importance of having to fight that and say it's not a woman's job to always cook. I think that is a valid argument, and a very valid argument, and a very valid recognition that we should have, that it's not just a woman's thing mentioning. At the same time, I also want to say that women have been doing it. It's the most important thing, and we have been doing it. So it's that combination of these different aspects that I wanted to bring together, which resulted in this kind of a, sadness and sorrow and strength, as I put it. Yeah, I don't know if I answer.
Thank you. And I think you also very beautifully demonstrated the female engine in daily life, in empowering and sustaining daily life. We have another question from Tyler. You mentioned that art, architecture, and the city itself helps to define the world of the film. Could you say more about the posters, paintings, and the figures that feature in the background as Kalyani moves around and eventually runs from the city, so to speak?
Yeah. See, I think I told you that I come from a print journalist background and then went into electronic media, television, and then into independent documentary filmmaking and production, and then finally into the feature fiction. So it's a long journey. But one of the things that is a kind of aesthetic of my film is a documentary aesthetic. You'll find that there is a strong observational documentary aesthetic in my film. And that is because of 10 years of my experience with Ian, who is essentially an observational documentary filmmaker. And while I can never become an observational documentary filmmaker myself, because you need immense patience for that, immense patience, which I think I don't have, which is why I think I probably moved to fiction, because then you have a script and then you can do what you want to do rather than shoot for 100 hours and then accumulate 1 hour of footage from that. So while I don't have the patience to become an observational documentary filmmaker, it has a very strong influence on my fictional, aesthetic. And so that, combined with the fact that we didn't have much money and that it was not a high production budget or anything like that, these two things combined together for me to shoot Kalyani walking in the street without doing anything to the background. So it was only a choice of which street and not what I will put behind. Nothing that you see on the streets is created by me. Whether it is all those boys sitting in front of the secretariat, and Trivandrum is very famous for that. Any day in the year you come, you will find protesters in front of the secretariat, the white building, full of men, hardly one woman there, and Kalyani walking by. Whether it is that or whether it's all those red flags, because we are, we have a communist government now, which keeps changing every now and then. But right now we have a communist government, and we had a communist government when I shot the film. So the red flags are part and parcel of our life. And then, of course, you have Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, you have the Congress icons in one corner. Then you have the temple. Then you have the old junction, the tree under which there is a madman. I don't know if you remember. It's a very old, what we call junction. These junctions with a big tree and lots of men just loitering around it, and a small tea shop there, and a local madman, the local thief, and the local, whatever, all of them kind of local poet, all of them will kind of gather there and talk. This is a Trivandrum, in fact, that is slowly dying. So I wanted that junction, that big tree and that madman. Even madmen are slowly being pushed into institutions. Whereas earlier, every junction would have their local madman. There would be somebody, and people would just give him food and give him tea, and you would just hang around and evening go home and sleep. So this is a Trivandrum that is changing, and you have these high rises coming up, which is where Vijayan is staying. So obviously it's not his flat, it's his cousin's flat. So he's staying in his cousin's flat in a high rise. And these high rises are now becoming very, very common in Kerala. So in terms of architecture, Kalyani comes from a street, which is what we call agraharam, which is old Brahmin houses where the people in the houses were connected to the working in the temple. They were like pujaris, or they give flowers, or they make music or something for the temple. So this is a street in front of a temple, but it's a bygone kind of thing. So now it's all, some of those houses are, in some places, are retained as heritage sites, that particular kind of terraced houses that you see there. But the where Kalyani is living, it's completely, it's a question of time before it is demolished and a high rise comes up there. So that's a very, very old agraharam that you see. It's a bit claustrophobic when you enter. You can see right from the door that she opens to the end door, you can see it's one straight line. And that's all there is. It's one narrow. So these are not like very rich people or anything. It's like poor Brahmins, as it were. So that is the architecture of that particular building. And then you have the joint family house. That's like, it came up in the 40s, 50s, 60s, these kind of really big concrete buildings and with everybody in that house. It's a joint family. And then you have the flat, which is a modern thing in Trivandrum. Say last 10, 15 years at the most, where all these high rises, raining like crazy, all the high rises are coming up. And that's the nuclear family is becoming more and more the norm. So you have all these flats with this one person, two person, three persons, like almost like the West, where we are becoming with these high rises. So architecturally, these were the three things. And the journey that Kalyani makes between these three houses is as it is, nothing created by us. It's only the choice of the framing, and the roads are ours. Everybody walking there, everything that you see there is real.
Thank you. We have another question. We have a attendee would like to know about the motivation for depicting the friendship between Kalyani and the male roommate, in which he is portrayed as the sort of artist and intellectual while she is his audience. And, you know, specifically, what was the motivation for depicting her this way, particularly when she seems to act as a channel for poetry and for music in many of the other repeating scenes, such as when she passes the musician, you know, when she's there while the love letters are being written. And then we have another attendee who followed up on that question. This is very interesting because another attendee had interpreted that roommate to be a vision or projection of Kalyani's inner desires or inner voice. So if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. This film has gone to many festivals and we have had many discussions, and invariably, the one character that creates a lot of interest and discussion is the man in the attic. See, as a filmmaker, I am very, very clear about who my characters are. Whether I make that very clear or not is a different issue, but I am very clear who they are. But if there's one character who I have left to the audience and for you to decide who this person is, and that is this man in the attic. That is Kalyani's friend, Kalyani's lover, Kalyani is lodger, Kalyani is imagination, Kalyani is projection. So everything goes. And it's very, very interesting because wherever this film is screened and the discussion happens, I don't know if there are any Bengali students you have there, but I want to share my experience of the very first screening in Kolkata at the Kolkata International Film Festival. And during the press conference, there was a lot of discussion. And one of the things that the audience told me was how they were reminded of both Satyajit Ray as well as Ritwik Gattar. And I was so kind of like flattered because they're like two of my, just my inspiration. So I was really flattered. But they told me that the Kalyani's relationship with this person in the room, and they asked me, is it her brother? And I was like, I hadn't thought of it as her brother at all. So then I thought, okay, I mean, why do you ask me that? And they said that it reminded them of Ritwik Gattar's Mekata Kathara, where you have the main character working and her brother wanting to be this writer, and he's always talking about being the writer, and she flogs and earns for the house. So it's possible that each audience in each part of the world might find their own meaning as to who this person is for Kalyani. So when I heard this, I thought, okay, maybe it is her brother. It's possible to think like that, though I had never thought of him as her brother. So I thought that's possible. And but there is a hint in the film. Even as you may think it may be her brother, maybe her lover, maybe her lodger, maybe her husband, maybe her any imagination, whatever. That one thing that there are a couple of hints, and one of the things is they never touch each other in the film. They never touch each other. He is not seen by anybody else in the film. And when she leaves the last day, he's not in the picture. So the possibility that he's a projection is probably more valid than any other understanding, but all of that is also possible. Now, why is he a projection? I mean, he could be because that women, and certainly women of my generation, could not even articulate the fact that they wanted to be filmmakers. They could write screenplays. They could make films. This was not even something that it was not for them to do. It's for the men, and the women were muses. The women are always muses to the artists. I mean, I think that's there all over the world. I don't think that's got anything to do with developed or underdeveloped. It's always the case that the men are the artists, the women are the muses. So for a woman to be an artist and to say that I want to be an artist itself is a difficulty. To articulate that itself is a difficulty. So that was one of the ideas that went into this creation. What was the other question along with that?
The other, I guess, the question was, why was he depicted as the intellectual and the artist, whereas in other scenes, she really serves as a channel for poetry and for music. But I think that you answered the question. We also have another question from Professor Darshana Mini, who's in attendance. So the actress who plays the role of Kalyani received, so Gargi Anantan, forgive me for butchering her name, received the award for the Best Actress for this film at the New York Indian International Film Festival. How did you cast her for that role? And were there any auditions that you did for the casting?
Yes, I mean, certainly Gargi Anantan, who did the role of Kalyani in Kalyani, is a fine. I mean, she was a graduate from the School of Drama in Thrissur in Kerala. She was doing a final year. She was doing a final exams when she contacted us because she heard about this. But
one of the things was my niece was supposed to, she was not supposed to do it. She was my backup. My niece was my backup for this role of Kalyani. She has acted in a few of my short films, so I know that she's a fantastic actor, but she was very busy with other things and she was out of station. But she told me that if you do not find your Kalyani, I'll come and do your film. So I had that freedom to search for my Kalyani till the very last minute. I did not have to compromise or settle for anybody because I knew that my niece was there to do I knew she would do a fantastic job of it. She just had to come down. So I knew she would do it. But I was searching for my Kalyani all along. And 1 week before our shoot, Gargi Anandan from the School of Drama came to hear about this film and she contacted somebody in the team and said, would I consider her? And because there was hardly any time to ask her to come and see me and so on and so forth, I just sent her 2 pages of her script, which was the scene where the debt collectors from the bank come. And because she was in School of Drama and because all her classmates are actors, so I told her that just do that and send it to me, which she did. She interpreted it in her own way. And she did that role and she sent it to me. It was just 2 or 3 minute clip. And I just told her, come. And then she came and then we talked and that was it. And Gargi is a trained actor. She's into physical theater and she's fantastic. She just gets it. It's not an easy role. Now, some may think, oh, she just walks up and down, but it's one of the really difficult role to do, where you have to be a very shadowy figure. You're just completely a shadowy figure in the film, and yet you're the core of the film. Yet you're the central core of the film. To bring that, you need immense confidence to be able to pull that off. And that's what Gargi had. Absolutely immense confidence. And this is her first feature film. Just as my first feature film, this was also her first feature film. So I think there was a kind of freshness and to that, which kind of worked to that, I think.
Wonderful. Wonderful to hear how this all came together. Do we have any other questions from audience members? Darshana is raising her hand. Darshana, please feel free to unmute.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Thank you so much. So I'm a native Malayalam speaker, so it's been a pleasure actually to watch the film a third time. So thank you once again for this wonderful Q&A. So my question is actually about, cast. I know that you already mentioned it's not an issue-based film, but if it was not an agraharam and if the cast of Kalyani was a different one, how would story might have been different? Like, what was your take on it? I know that you have actually wanted the story to be set in a particular kind of class caste background, but I was just thinking because you initially mentioned about the kind of struggle female filmmakers have in independent film circuit in Malayalam cinema and your own kind of frustration and struggle in your initial phase when you made your 2005 documentary. So if you could just talk a little bit about at any point in your scripting phase, did you think about cast?
Yes. Thank you, Darshana. Okay. This is, what do I say? Kalyani comes from a Tamil community and she probably is Brahmin living in a agraharam, even though today in the agraharam street, communities, people from different communities stay. And it's not her own own place. She's staying there on rent. So that is her identity. It's a mixed identity because you can see that her aunt is also there, and this is a reality in many families in Trivandrum. There is a kind of mixed identity of Tamil and Malayalam in their blood, as it were. And it's also a mixed identity of sometimes Brahmin and non-Brahmin blood in their flowing in their body, whatever. So it is, but there is a kind of what may be seen as upper caste thing. And I think my own experience of seeing lots of women from that community where they deal, I don't know if Darshana, you know this, in Trivandrum, it is there, I'm sure it's there in different parts of Kerala and Tamil Nadu as well, where they make snacks. They make local snacks like murukku, laddu, and all of those things, and they take it in a big vessel and go from house to house selling these very traditional snacks. So they are very, and pickle and so on. So they're very poor people, but they actually are seen as maybe upper caste, but they are working class. So there is a kind of working class, upper caste dynamic in that. Then if you come to the two houses that she goes to work in, and they are very, very clearly, I mean, though I do not say it anywhere, but they are a landed upper caste and could be Nair. Could be. I don't say it anywhere, but they could be a landed upper caste family, which is slowly losing their land because that has happened in Kerala. The land goes, but they transfer their power onto the business class. So they are a landed class, once upon a time, probably agricultural, moving to the business and moving to the multinational company sector and being ambitious. Now, if you take Vijayan, he is a typical government employee, and we have lots of such progressive. They are invariably, from the left, and they are very well-read. And Malayalam is, as you all will know, one of the languages in which most of the great books in the world have been translated to first. Certainly the first Indian language, right from Das Kapital and everything, and Russian novels. And that is why you have all those poetry. And none of those poems are Malayalam poems. They are translated poems of great poets like Mayakovsky, like Lorca, like Zuzimo, like Andal, like Mirabai. That's a completely different thing. If anybody wants to talk about the poems, that's a different issue. So that is the cast of these two men. And Vijayan is from, he epitomizes that government employee, the government mentality, and the government and kind of what is seen today as lack of ambition in those people who take a job and then just leave their job, and they have their poetry, and then they have their other activities, and then they just want a quiet life. So he symbolizes that. Now, among the landed upper class and upper caste, I guess, and there was a time when they prided in having cooks who came from the upper caste. So rather than a lower caste working class, they would go for a upper caste working class cook. So this was also a pattern around a period of time. So this is what I'm really capturing. And ultimately, when it comes to women, what is the caste? We are all working class. That is what I really think, that women do not have a caste or a religion or anything like that. So I do strongly, not strongly, it is there. The class politics is much, much more foregrounded than any other politics in the film. Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have any other audience questions? We're just about hitting time, but if there are any remaining questions, we can go ahead and open the floor. Okay, wonderful. I think we don't have any further questions, so that will conclude our program. I know that I speak for everyone when I say that we're very deeply appreciative that you were able to come at such an early hour and share this conversation with us. And what a beautiful film. It was an absolute pleasure for all of us. So everyone, if you could please help me virtually thank Dr. Geetha J. And feel free to unmute and say hello or say goodbye on your way out.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Darshana, and everybody who came to see the film. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is really wonderful. And thanks for sharing the details of the production as well.